Hey there. Welcome to Mike's Collection, episode 288. I'm Mike, and the part of my collection that I'm going to be talking about today is some Masters of the Universe Origins figures from Mattel. So, Origins is it's one of the current Masters of the Universe toy lines coming out from Mattel. They also have their Masterverse series, which are the 7-inch, very articulated, very detailed figures, whereas the Origins figures are these shorter, 5-inch, kind of squatty figures. They're designed to look like the old vintage figures of the 80s, except with some increased articulation. Both lines are great, but I'm focusing on the Origins line these days, and they've been putting out a lot of new figures. So I just recently did a review of, I think it was Wave 12, and this batch that I'm going to talk about today, it's not a wave of figures per se. It is kind of a mixture. It's a lot of the deluxe figures. So a standard Origins figure comes on a blister card. They retail for about $20 American. The deluxe figures, they come on a larger blister card. They retail for about $30. Mattel justifies that by saying they're giving us a bunch of extra accessories, although that's debatable. So what I've got here today are 3 deluxe figures. Now, ideally, I would have 4 deluxe figures here to talk about. And if I did, I would probably just call this video Deluxe, and I would just review those 4 figures. But I only have 3 to talk about. I've got Dragon Blaster Skeletor, King Hiss, and Snakeface. I don't have the other deluxe figure that came out in the past few months, which is Thunder Punch He-Man. And I don't think I'm going to be getting him, which is kind of unfortunate. I passed on him when he initially went up for pre-order at Big Bad Toy Store, which is where I get all of my Origins figures because you can't find them at retail anywhere in my area. So I have to pre-buy them from Big Bad, and I went through a little period there where I stopped pre-ordering everything. I was initially a completist, and I said, okay, this is getting out of control. I have too many He-Man, too many Skeletors, so I kind of stopped buying things. But then I was regretting it. Even before the other figures shipped to me, I would see that I had these incomplete waves pre-ordered, and I was like, maybe I should pre-order those things. And I was able to go back and pre-order some stuff that I had initially passed on. I think Dragon Blaster Skeletor was one that I had initially passed on. The Serpent Claw Man-at-Arms was one I had passed on. The Snake Tila figure, I passed on her, and she is now sold out on Big Bad Toy Store, but I was able to order her from Amazon, and she's actually in the mail now. So I'm going to be reviewing that wave of figures sometime in the near future. Thunder Punch He-Man is another figure that's sold out. And when I decided, I am going to go back and order him, I couldn't find him on Amazon or anything, and even on eBay, he was selling for very inflated prices. So I wish I had just pre-ordered him when I had the chance at regular, $30 retail value. I'm not willing to pay over $100 US for this thing, because that would cost me like $130 in Canada plus shipping. So unfortunately, my collection is probably going to be lacking Thunder Punch He-Man. Anyway, so I'm going to talk about the 3 deluxe figures. And since that's kind of, only a few figures, not really enough to fill a whole video by my standards, I figure I've got a couple of Mattel Creations figures, which I'm going to lump into this video as well. Mattel Creations is Mattel's kind of collector website, and they do sell some figures exclusively through there. It's usually more collector-themed characters that aren't necessarily featured in the cartoons that regular collectors would be clamoring for. They're more for the hardcore fans, I guess. So the 2 figures that I have from Mattel Creations, I would say fall into that category. I have Fang-or and Lady Slither, which both fall under the Snake Men umbrella. So yeah, I've got 4 different Snake Men to talk about today, and then a Skeletor. So we're going to dive right into it. Now, with most of these figures, I've already got them open. As you can see, here's Snakeface right here. But I shot some footage of them in the packaging, and I usually splice that in and do a little split screen so you can see what it looks like. Lady Slither, the packaging was so nice, I kept her in the box because I wanted to kind of show you guys and be able to talk about the box rather than just split it in a split screen. So I'm going to grab that, and we're going to quickly take a look at that before we look at all the figures outside of the box. So here is the Lady Slither box set. Now it's got this snaky scale pattern all around the box. You get this snake image on the back with a little bit of a backstory in there. And then the front of the box, you've got this like really beautiful looking medallion. It's kind of textured, so you can feel it. It comes out from, I don't know if you can actually see that, but it pops out from the box. So it's very cool. And I love that look of her with all that snaky hair. It's very Medusa. And, I grew up a huge fan of the old Clash of the Titans movie. And so I've always been kind of fascinated by Medusa ever since. And so Lady Slither is basically He-Man's Medusa. And I thought I had to have this figure. She's a brand new character. This is her first ever figure. She wasn't in the vintage line. She wasn't in the classics line. Nothing. So we'll talk a little bit more about her background once I open her up. But so you get this big cool box. Now you slide it off like so. On the back here, you've got some nice imagery, some nice artwork like you always get on your Masters of the Universe packaging. And what's interesting to note there is there's 2 other Snake Men on the back. And those characters are unknown to me. I think those are brand new characters. You can tell that they're mixed up of other characters. Like this guy here, he's got Cobra Khan's kind of hooded head. So usually when characters appear on the package like this, that's a good indication that we're going to get them in a future wave. So I don't know. These characters might not have names yet, but maybe they will if they make them into toys. And I imagine we'll get Cobra Khan's head with this character. Now this guy here, he doesn't really look like any snake character that's been established before. But he looks like there's a human kind of pharaoh character named Nethu. And so this kind of looks like Nethu turned into a snake guy. So who knows? If we get this character, maybe we'll get this guy, and maybe he's somebody completely different. Maybe he's Nethu transformed into a snake. Or if they give us this character, I wouldn't be surprised if they repaint it and give us Nethu. I'm not sure how to say his name. And maybe we'll get him in a later wave, which is also pretty cool. So besides the artwork on the back, you also get some cool artwork on the front. So you'll see Fangor. He's a snake man that we're going to be talking about today. You see Lady Slither. And then you see these 3 other snake guys. All of them are unknown characters as well. Like they could have very easily put known snake men, like Snake Face or like Ratlore, on the packaging. But instead they created new characters, which is a good sign that those will be characters that we will see in a future wave. So, very cool. And this guy here with the long neck, I think he's actually the same character that appeared on the artwork for Serpent Claw Man-at-Arms in Wave 12. So if they've showed this character to us twice now, I'd say there's a very good chance that we're going to get him in action figure form. And then you see Lady Slither through the window there. So you can see this is quite a big box. This is the kind of box we get for a lot of the vehicles. Even the deluxe figures still just come on blister cards. So this is something a little different. And you'll see you've got the option here. She's got legs, and it looks like she might use some same parts from like Tila or Eva Lynn, stuff like that. But then she's got this lower half snake body option, which is how you see her on this package here. She's got a lower half like a snake, just like Medusa. While on the back, you see her with her human legs. So I'm not sure what the deal is there. Maybe I need to read the little story on the back of the package there. If she can switch from legs to snake body at will, or maybe this was her before she further mutated or something. I don't know, but it's cool to have that choice. And the fact that they've given us this lower half of a snake body, they're definitely going to want to get some bang for their buck and reuse that. So that's why I'm thinking when we get this red guy here, who's also got a snake lower half, that we're going to see those bits reused. So anyway, very cool box for a very cool character that I'm excited to open for the very first time. And so why don't we do that, and then we'll take a look at these figures outside of the packaging. So here is Lady Slither outside of the packaging. Now, I have known about this character for years. Not that there was a whole lot to know. I believe that several years ago, back when Mattel was still making their Masters of the Universe Classics line, so that's the line that ran from about 2009 to about 2019 or so. And those figures were like 6 or 7 inch figures. They weren't as articulated as the current Masterverse stuff, but anyway, the Classics line was a really cool line of figures. And it was pretty expansive. They got a lot of characters covered under the Classics line. The Origins line and the Masterverse line have a long way to go before they match the number of figures in the Classics line. Anyway, my recollection is that when they were still looking to add new characters to the Classics line, they had some designers come up with some ideas for new characters, including some new Snake Men. Lady Slither was one of those new characters that was designed, and the design was shown. I don't know if it was leaked or maybe it was shown to fans at one of the Power Cons or something as a potential idea. Anyway, it never saw the light of day. So I think she basically had the look and the name, but I don't think there was much more to it than that. So here we are getting her all these years later. Now, I intended to kind of fact check myself and make sure I was giving you accurate information, but I quickly Googled her and I couldn't find any of those old posts that introduced the concept art and everything. So take everything I just did with a grain of salt, but I think that's basically her origin, is that she was created somewhere before the end of the Classics line, like pretty late in the game, so maybe 2017, 2018, something like that. Never got a figure in the Classics line, but they created her for Origins, and that's pretty cool. Because as much as I love getting all the characters that I had as a kid, I feel for these toy lines to grow, any of them, whether it's G.I. Joe, Transformers, He-Man. You can't just keep making the same characters over and over and over again. Like, some new kids might be excited to get He-Man for the first time, but a lot of these things, let's be honest, are geared towards the adult collector. And even guys like me are going to eventually get bored of buying He-Man repeatedly. By giving us new characters like this, it breathes new life into the line. Now, maybe not everybody feels that way, but for me, it's a lot more likely that I will continue to collect Origins if they keep adding some new characters and expanding the mythology and all that sort of stuff. So yeah, very cool figure. Now, I actually meant to mention this when we were looking at her inside of the box, but I showed you that really nice artwork on the outer sleeve of the box where it showed that Medusa-like image with all the snakes in the hair. Now, you will notice that Lady Slither, she's just a brunette. She does not have snakes in her hair at all. Now, that is true to, I believe, the original concept design, and it's also true to the artwork on the packaging where it actually showed Lady Slither sitting in her throne and everything. So I'm not really sure why that crest that they put on the box, they gave the snake hair, because it seems like that would be a good crest to put on a Medusa figure, but it doesn't really seem to tie into Lady Slither because there seems to be no precedent for her to have snakes in her hair. That's definitely more of a Medusa thing. Anyway, the figure is nice. Now, these toys, these Origins figures, they all come with mini comics, just like the vintage toys of the 80s. So since I couldn't find anything about her on Google, really, I thought, well, maybe the little mini comic that she comes with will shed some light on their intended origins of her. And to be honest, I just quickly rifled through this and I found it a little confusing. You see there's this giant cosmic constrictor that the galaxy is contained within and whatever. And you see here Lady Slither beheads King Hiss, the former leader of the Snake Men. And anyway, this little comic book didn't really tell me much or give me much information. But it's cool that they give you these things. So you get the mini comic. Other than that, you see she's got a snake staff, which is the same accessory that we get with Teela. And then she's got this little sword. Now, the sword is actually a plot point in the comic book, so this is supposed to be like one of those mystical items. There are plenty of them in the Masters of the Universe mythology. But, yeah, I can't say for certain if this is a newly sculpted piece or not. We might have got this toy somewhere else before. There's nothing really particularly exciting or interesting about it. But those are her accessories, except for the main piece here, which she has the snake lower body. So you can see here, this piece here is all one piece, and then you've got these a couple other pieces here with articulated bits. Now I'm not sure how it's going to work. Hopefully she still stands up. Okay, it might take a little bit of experimentation, and she also comes with this extra piece here. So I think you have to snap this piece into that first, like so, and then we'll connect this to her waist. Before we do that, though, I do just want to quickly talk about her legs. I did expect this figure to be pretty much Teela from the neck down. I am pleased to say that it's not entirely Teela. She does have Teela's legs and boots. So you can see that those are the same. She has Teela's arms. So like those cuffs with the little swirly design. And then she's got those kind of up on her forearms there, or her upper arm. She's got that little, I don't know what you call it, little bracelet, I guess. So same arms, same legs. Now, you can see here she's got a very snake person, like it's very specific to her. It's got the fangs, it's got the snake logo, so clearly she wasn't going to reuse Teela's armor. But I was surprised to see that she has a new lower kind of crotch piece, we'll say. Because this is the same one we've seen multiple times on all the different Teelas and the different Evil Lins. You know, I don't think anybody would have batted an eye if we got the same piece for her. The same pelvis, I guess is a better way to say it. But no, they gave us what I think is a brand new sculpted piece, which is kind of different because like it looks just like the pelvic piece that we get for He-Man and a lot of other characters with the fuzzy shorts and that style of belt. So I guess it's cool that they gave us that so it matches a lot of other characters. But I do kind of think where she's a new character, you know, a brand new design, being made for the very first time, if they had to go through the trouble of sculpting a whole new pelvis for her, I kind of think they maybe should have given her something a little bit more unique, something a little bit more sneaky perhaps. But anyway, I'm just glad she doesn't have the same piece as Teela. And then her head, of course, the head is a totally unique piece as well. So the hair looks nice. The face looks nice. Not a ton of detail, but that's because it's an Origins figures. These figures aren't really known for their detail because they're supposed to be kind of retro. The headdress there isn't very detailed. It looks like that's supposed to be a kind of a snake kind of coiled up and ready to strike. But there's no, as far as I can tell, it doesn't look like there's any eyes or anything sculpted on there. So it's a little lazy there. And then she's got the cape, which is kind of a soft rubbery. You can bend it a little bit, but you can't really pose it because it just kind of flops back into place. So yeah. Pretty cool figure. Alright, so let's see how easy it is. I really hope I don't break her. The Origins figures are meant to have interchangeable parts. So, okay, so that pops out like that. This pops in like so. And there you go. There she is with her snake body. Okay, and that was relatively easy to get her to hold her pose there. And that's probably how I will display her on my shelf, because it's just a lot more interesting. We've never had a Masters of the Universe character look like this before, so yeah, I think that's pretty cool. Now I don't have any other Lady Slither figures for comparison, obviously, but what I did think I would bring out here, this is an actual Medusa figure from Boss Fight Studio and the Vitruvian Hacks line. So this figure came out several years ago now. They really perfected this kind of snake body with articulated bits that allow the character to stand upright. Sometimes you have to wrestle with it a little bit, but it usually works pretty good. And it's even got more segments than the Lady Slither here, so I think this one's even more effective to get more poses. Like you can actually lay Medusa out flat like a snake and stuff, where you wouldn't be able to do that with Lady Slither because that big solid piece on the bottom. But this one here, this one has the snakes in her hair, the way you would associate with a classic Medusa. Anyway, pretty cool. And yeah, I like Lady Slither. You know, and I'm fine with her not having the snakes. I wouldn't want this to just be a Medusa figure. She's kind of her own thing. She will look really good with all my other snake men. And yeah, I'm quite pleased with her. So, sticking with the snake men, now let's take a look at Fangor outside of the packaging. So this guy here, if memory serves, this guy came out of the same like brainstorming session that created Lady Slither. So back near the end of the Classics line, you know, the designers got together to try to come up with some new Snake Men, and they came up with this guy, who I think was supposed to be like the Snake Man mechanic or Snake Man engineer or inventor, something like that. I can't quite recall the details. And again, I could have researched it beforehand. But since I didn't have any luck with Lady Slither, I figured, what the hell, I'll just dive right into talking about him. So this was a character that actually did make the cut. They made a figure of him in the Classics line. And it is actually one of my favorite figures from the Classics, even though he was one of the last figures produced. So I'm really excited to get this guy again. So this is the only the second figure of him ever, because he is not a character that existed in the vintage line or even in like the 2000X line or anything like that. He's a relatively new character. So yeah, because he's a Mattel Creations exclusive, whenever you order these guys, they come in like a brown mailer box that's got some cool artwork on the front and the back. Once you open it up, you basically get a standard carded figure. Usually the back of the packaging has some cool artwork rather than just the typical back of the package cross promotion. You usually get like one big image and stuff. So Fangor or Fangor, he had all of that stuff, so that's pretty cool. Anyway, he also came with a little mini comic. So you can see him featured on the front there. I've had this guy for a while. I think I read this when I first got it. I don't really remember all the details. But these comics just give you a little bit of background on the characters. As I flick through this now, you can see here's like He-Man having a vision of him as a snake man with a snake tail. So I think that's a pretty good inkling that we might get mutated He-Man someday with Lady Slither's lower half. What else we get here? We also get like some sort of cosmic infused He-Man. So that seems like another character that we definitely probably get in the future. Anyway, the comics are just a fun little detail that bring me back to my childhood. Anyway, Fangor here. So he has fangs, hence the name. Masters of the Universe characters often had pretty straightforward names. You know, the skunk guy, he stinks, so his name is Stinkor. Pretty basic stuff. So the idea with this figure, and with a lot of the newly created characters for the Classics line, is they wanted to create characters that sort of like they had an action feature. How can I word that? Like, so in the vintage line, they always did have action features. Like characters like Mecha-Neck, he had a mechanized neck that his head would be low, and then you'd turn him at the waist, and his neck would pop up. So the vintage line was full of that. The Classics line, not so much, but they tried to recreate those functions as best they could. So with Mecha-Neck, you had to pop his head off, and you could put an extended neck on him, and then put his head on. So it was like his neck grew, but you couldn't just hit a lever and extend the neck. So when they designed Fangor, they were like, if this guy had existed in the vintage line, his like play feature would be that there'd be like a lever on his back, and his fangs would grow and shrink. So that was kind of the concept they came up with when they made him. So for that reason, now where I lost his accessories here. Bear with me 1 second. Okay, so I'm back. I know for you guys it was only a second, but I just had a very frustrating 25 minutes. Before I sat down to do this video, I had all these figures laid out on my desk beside me with their mini comics and with their accessories so that I could talk about them. And with this guy here, I wanted to show you this accessory, which is his smaller teeth. The idea being that you can detach his longer teeth here and replace them with the smaller ones, so you can display them like that if you prefer. And that kind of replicates the idea of an action feature of his teeth growing. Anyway, I reached over to find these little teeth, and they weren't there. So I picked up my other figures. I'm like, oh, did it fall over there? Did it fall on the floor? No, it didn't. I thought, did it possibly fall into my garbage can? So I just dumped out my entire garbage can to look for this little accessory, and the garbage can was pretty full. I'm crawling around on my hands and knees. I'm looking under bookcases. I'm like, did it possibly fall on the floor and bounce up into a shelf? I was freaking out. I was like, where did this thing go? I looked everywhere. I was literally just crawling around. I'm out of breath now from lifting things up and moving chairs and everything, trying to find this. Anyway, between me shooting the intro and when I opened Lady Slither, my dog needed to go outside because I heard her scratching at the garage door. So I left the room, I went out, I let her at the garage, out the back door. She came back in and didn't think much of it. Anyway, after tearing this room apart, I went out to my garage and I found these laying on the concrete floor. So they must have fallen into my lap earlier, maybe when I grabbed the mini comic for Lady Slither. And then when I got up to take my dog out, they hitchhiked on me and fell off by the garage door. So I can't believe I even thought to look out there to find them. But I was like losing my mind trying to figure out where the hell these went. So anyway, here they are. I'm not even going to bother at this point to show you what they look like, but trust me, they come out. I think in the package he might have had the smaller teeth, and I had to change them out. I don't recall. But I do know it was took a little bit more effort than I wanted to try and get these teeth out, and I really don't want to mess with them anymore. But that is an option for you. Anyway, besides the teeth, he comes with this sword, which is kind of like a scimitar or something, I guess. It's got that cool kind of curvy design. And then he's got a wrench. And again, because he's supposed to be an inventor or something, so I guess that's one of the tools from his lab. Otherwise, he's got a pretty cool design. I think he is, by and large, like unique pieces. Like maybe his feet are reused or something, but like these legs and the armor and all that stuff, I think it's all pretty unique to him. So I do just want to do a quick comparison with the Classics version. Whoop. So there we go. You can see how these guys size up. They're very similar. The Classics version, I think, is a little bit more detailed. This was much more of a collector-friendly line, or a line geared towards collectors. So like you see here, he's got extra gold on his leg pieces that this guy, they remain unpainted. His like belt, he's got that snake painted green. He's got some of the little rivets painted gold. This guy, he doesn't have all that extra paint apps. But still, they did a pretty good job of recreating him. And yeah, for the people that missed out on this Fangor, because I think he's pretty hard to get nowadays, he's probably pretty expensive. So yeah, I think if you have to get this guy, you're not really missing out on much. I think they've done a very good job of giving you a very cool figure to match this very cool figure that we got a few years back. Now his neck is a little loose, you might be noticing that. So that's maybe the only knock I really have on this figure, is that his head's a little loose. And if there was one other thing I wanted to complain about, it's that the Classics version had a little sidekick. It was a little winged snake that wrapped around his shoulder, almost like as if he had like a little parrot or something. This guy does not have the little sidekick. It's not a big deal, but considering that this was an online exclusive geared towards collectors, it seems like they could have done that, given you that one extra accessory to really make him feel complete. But anyway, that's it. Let's move on to the next figure. So next up, let's take a look at the first of our 3 deluxe figures. So these guys came on the blister card with the extra parts. So this here is Snakeface. Again, he is one of the Snake Men. And this guy there was a vintage figure of him in the 80s toy line. I did not have Snakeface when I was a kid, so I don't really have any attachment to him, really. But he's a cool character because, as I mentioned earlier, I loved the Clash of the Titans film, like the original Clash of the Titans film, which I think came out in 1981. So I was born in 78, so I was quite young when I saw that. But I love that film. And as much as I like Lady Slither, because she's kind of a nod to Medusa, Snakeface is even more of a nod to Medusa than she is. Because sure, even though he's a male, his face here, when you look at it with that scaly face and everything, that is much more like the Medusa from Clash of the Titans. And you see here, he's got snakes on his head. I don't know if that's supposed to be his hair or not. It kind of looks like it, because it almost looks like he's got a little snake tail, ponytail coming out there. So yeah, he's got snakes on his head, snakes coming out of his face. Just his face design looks very Medusa-like. Plus, his power is that he turns you to stone if you look at him, which is straight out of Medusa's story. So yeah, this guy's cool. The vintage toy, the action feature was that you would press a little lever on him and these snakes would come out of his face. So you would see these little, it might look like he had red eyes, but they'd be like kind of deeply set in his head, and then you'd pop them out and they turned out to be snakes. So that was kind of a cool feature. But in the Classics line, and again here we see it in the Origins line, they don't really have those same play features. So you can't do that. These snakes are permanently stuck out of his head. So you've got the two out of his eyes, then he's got the forked tongue, and then he's got these other two snakes coming out the back of his head there. But he does have an alternate head. Again, very Medusa-like. So you can choose to display him that way, and he's a little less intense with this head on. So there you go. And he's got his snake staff, which all the snake men usually do. And then he's got this weird shield, which is a bunch of snakes. Very kind of strange looking. It almost just looks like a big splat of slime to me, but it's based on the vintage figure. So, what else is his? On the vintage figure, these things folded down, and there were snakes that came out of his chest as well. I don't know if it worked just like this, because you see those are snakes. I don't know if there were little red snakes that came out of him in the vintage line or something, or maybe it was just that. But anyway, he does retain that little action feature that those come out. And yeah, he's pretty cool. Like, he's got these weird, his shoulders are kind of strange, I will say. Like, it almost looks like he's mutating, or he's a rock monster or something. Like, I don't know, the shoulders look a little out of place for the rest of the character. Like, his legs, he's got very smooth legs. He doesn't have scales or anything like that. His wrist, like, I'm all for the snake wrapped around his forearm. That makes sense. But then, yeah, I just don't know what's going on here. That seems kind of strange. Even the fact that they painted it green with kind of this wash seems to be like they're indicating something. But I don't know what. Again, maybe the mini comic would explain it. But I haven't really looked at the mini comic that much. But there he is, doing his thing in there. And look, there's, I guess, I'm assuming, is that Lady Slither? Because there she has snakes in her hair. Interesting. Maybe that's a whole different character entirely. Again, I should probably read these before I review the figures, but whatever. This is a toy review, not a comic review. So, I will just bring out my Classics snake face for a quick comparison. So he had the same idea. He had two alternate heads. One with the snakes coming out like this, and then he has the more neutral face. That's the one I chose to display him with. Oddly enough, this is a bigger figure, but his shield is quite a bit smaller than this guy's. Again, I'm not a big fan of the shield one way or the other, but at least the Origins figure looks like a more effective shield if he's actually trying to block some blows. This shield does not look particularly effective. Now, it's almost not fair to compare these things because they're trying to do something different. Clearly, the Classics version is more detailed. I like this guy better of the two. But I really do like, with the Origins line, how they go back to recreating the vintage toys of the 80s with the added articulation and stuff. He looks really good. So yeah, again, if you missed out on the Classics line, as a lot of people did, I think Masters of the Universe is getting a lot of new fans along the way. And it's a little expensive to try and collect these ones. So yeah, I guess it's just a matter of picking your preferred aesthetic. Do you like the Masterverse figures or do you like the Origins figures? Yeah, I think they're both pretty cool, but if I had to choose, the Origins figures are definitely the line that I prefer currently. So this is the last of the Snake Men that we're going to review today. This is King Hiss. So he is the leader of the Snake Men. Now it seems that Lady Slither might now be some competition for that role, but growing up, there was no such thing as Lady Slither. King Hiss was the undisputed leader of the Snake Men. And I loved my vintage King Hiss figure. He was probably the last Masters of the Universe figure that I ever got. Yeah, I have fond memories of playing with him. I thought he was really cool. Because me and my brother Doug, we collected all of our toys together when we were kids. And he had Skeletor. So when we played He-Man, he got to be the leader of the bad guys. And neither of us had Hordak. So when that faction was introduced, I had some of the the underlings, like Leech and Mantenna, But they just kind of joined up with Skeletor's army since we didn't have Hordak. And then when the Snake Men came out, King Hiss was finally me getting to have a leader. So it gave me a little bit more power, I guess, when we were playing. And I just thought it was a really cool figure. Now, I no longer have my vintage King Hiss, which is kind of a bummer. But he looked a lot like this. The Origins line do a really good job of creating the look of those vintage figures. He had the same accessories. He had the bright green snake staff, the red shield. Now, where the Origins figures are better is that they have articulated knees and they have articulated ankles and their arms can go side to side and all that sort of stuff. But King Hiss especially has increased articulation because with the vintage figure, he was just a shell. So the shell split down the middle, his head and his torso came off and his arms came off, and he had a snake body hidden underneath. So this is a snake man disguised as a human, and I thought it was very effective. Now, I don't think they've ever been able to recreate it quite as good in the later toy lines, but even though you can't do it as conveniently, I don't know what's better necessarily, because in order for his snake body to hide underneath the shell, it had to be kind of small, and maybe when you took his shell off, it was a little less impressive. This guy here, he's pretty good, but you can't do it as quickly. With my old vintage figure, it took like 2 seconds to pop the shell off. Now, what you have to do is you pop his arms out of their sockets like so. You pop his head off like so. You undo his armor. And then you see he's got the little snake body. There's a couple snakes wrapped around him. And then you attach these snake arms like this and the snake head. And there you go. Now you've got a fully formed King Hiss in his true form. And he looks pretty impressive. I'll be honest, he looks a lot more impressive than the vintage one, because the vintage figure had to have the snake arms small enough so that they fit inside the shell of the human arms. So they were about, a half of this width or so. But now you can see the snake arms are so much larger and longer. So it's a lot more impressive looking. And I really dig it. It's still such a cool design. And I'm torn on how I want to display him, because I really like his like human disguise. He looks very insane with those snaky eyes. So yeah, I really like this look. But of course, this looks cool too. So, I don't know. And, I almost wish that his whole torso came off, because if I could have a human torso, I could maybe put this whole upper half just on the shelf of my display as if he was coming out of the ground or something. But since you need this body to display him with the human form, you just end up with a loose head and loose arms. So that doesn't really work. But yeah, pretty cool, pretty cool. Now, I will do a quick comparison here with some of the classics versions of King Hiss. So here is the classic version here. So you can see the similarities to the human disguise. Now this guy here, he works very similar to him, except you do take his entire torso off. So you just pop his whole upper half off, and he came with a snaky upper half, which looked a lot like this. A little bit more detailed and everything. But I thought it was pretty cool. It was a pretty quick change to just pop one piece off, pop on another one. But when that figure was released, I remember the designers saying that they were a little underwhelmed. They had to keep the figure, under a certain budget, so the snake was still not as impressive as they wanted it to be. They had imagined doing a much bigger, scarier snake body, but they just didn't have the chance. So what they did later on down the line is they actually released, for the first time ever, a fully naked King Hiss. So no pants or anything. And here he is. So this is a fully snake version of King Hiss. So this is what the designers had originally wanted to do with this guy here. But I could grab it, but it's tucked away in a bag somewhere. I don't really want to dig it out. But it was basically the same as this, except with maybe one snake arm on each side. This one here much more impressive. The neck is much longer. It's got all these extra snakes. Very cool. Plus he's got these newly designed legs and everything. I really like it. So you can see here, the Origins line does not quite hold a candle to the Classics one. But, you know, it's not really worse. They're just different. And then the other King Hiss I'll bring out here is he got a pretty radical redesign in the 2000X series. Now, I don't have a 2000X figure of him, but I do have the Classics version of the 2000X design, which was much more like Egyptian and Pharaoh-like, and much sneakier. Like here, he could definitely pass for a human being if that's what he was trying to do. Here, he still looks like kind of a snake guy. But yeah, it's cool. I really like both designs. But anyway, I've got a nice little army of King Hisses here. And yeah, this deluxe figure, it does feel deluxe to me with all the extra body parts and everything. So yeah, you get some good bang for your buck on this one here. So before we move on to the final non-Snake Man figure, I just want to take a look at these 4 figures together. And they look really cool, all displayed together. I'm really happy to see my Snake Man army grow. I already have about another, I don't know, 6 or 7 Snake Men over in my collection. But these guys here really expand on the concept, because my other Snake Men are largely just that. They're snaky type men like Cobra Khan and Rattler. They look like humanoid snakes with arms and legs, which is kind of what Fangor is. But then when you see these other guys, they're all different. She's kind of humanoid with a snake lower half. He's like a humanoid with an upper half made of snakes. And then you've got this guy here, which is something totally different, who's got snakes living inside of him that pop out of his face. Like, it just makes for, the term Snake Man is pretty broad. So, anyway, I just think this is a really cool collection, and I really like all of these figures. So, the last deluxe figure that I have to talk about tonight is Dragon Blaster Skeletor. So, here he is. Now, this is a figure that, it's based on a vintage figure, but I didn't have the vintage one when I was a kid. I had no interest in it, to be honest with you. Like He-Man and Skeletor are obviously the main characters from the Masters of the Universe line. And so they had to refresh these characters every so often so that kids always had an opportunity to buy them. So they couldn't just keep the Wave 1 He-Man and Skeletor on the shelf at all times. So, you know, they kept coming up with new ways. So the first versions were like the battle armor in the vintage line, and then they came out with Thunder Punch He-Man and Dragon Blaster Skeletor and Terror Claws Skeletor and all these different versions of them. And so that's why we have, even all the way up to today, we keep getting remakes of all those vintage figures. But as a kid, I had the original He-Man and Skeletor, or like I had He-Man, my brother had Skeletor. So we didn't really feel the need to update with these, I would say, lesser versions. Like Skeletor didn't have this in the cartoon. He didn't carry a dragon around on his back. It seems kind of silly. So yeah, I had no interest in this. And then even when I was buying the Classics figures back in the from 2009 to 2019, a lot of the figures they were making, like Origins, were remakes of the vintage toys. So all of those He-Man and Skeletor variants were getting redone in the Classics line. And I bought very few of those. I did not buy the Classics version of Dragon Blaster Skeletor, again, because I thought it was kind of a silly version. I have 4 or 5 Skeletors in the Classics line. So I have the standard one, I have the Battle Armor one, I have the Keldor one, which is before he turned into Skeletor. Maybe I have the New Adventures version. So whenever there was a design that I thought was worth my time, I picked them up. But those figures were quite expensive, so I didn't really want to buy just characters I didn't really care about. When it came to the Origins line, they're quite affordable. So I thought, you know what? For the first time, I'm just going to go nuts. I'm going to buy all the different versions of He-Man and Skeletor, no matter how silly. But I have, as I mentioned earlier, 6 or 7 He-Mans and Skeletors by now. Money is getting a little tight. Space is getting a little tight. And I thought, am I really going to keep buying every silly version? And so that's why I did not pull the trigger on Dragon Blaster, Skeletor, or Thunder Punch He-Man when they first went up for pre-order. I did eventually cave. But yeah, Thunder Punch I missed out on, but I did get this Dragon Blaster Skeletor. And he's fine. Like, he's not the worst Skeletor. I think that belongs to Terror Claws. But yeah, I still think it's a little silly. Like, I wish this dragon looked a little better. like in the vintage line, the concept here was that you filled the dragon with water and you pumped his head and he sprayed water. And I think it might even still do that. Like he's got the little hole in his mouth there. He still has the pump action. I can't remember. Does he do it or not? I've had this figure for a while now. Maybe. Maybe he does, maybe he doesn't. But anyway, that's the idea. And that's why he looks the way he does. But I really wish that in this updated version, the dragon maybe came off. Maybe he was articulated. Like, that would make it seem more interesting to me. This just looks goofy. He's got a real metal chain, which is cool. But like this lock, it'd be nice if that actually locked. Like if you could click that padlock into place, but you can't. So it just always remains kind of unlocked, which is kind of dumb. This whole idea of the metal chain being attached to the dragon, and it's not even like he has a collar on. Like he's just got this weird hook that comes out of his flesh, which doesn't make sense. Like they could have given him a spiked collar to attach the padlock to, would make more sense. I know they're just trying to honor what was done in the vintage line, but if the vintage line didn't make any sense, maybe they could have improved it here. So yeah, the padlock, not locked, attached to this weird lump on his neck. The chain goes through this bit on Skeletor's chest. I don't really know what the point of that is. And then it attaches to his little wrist. So are we supposed to believe, like, does the dragon want to be here? Is he captive of Skeletor? If he is, I feel like he could probably escape since the padlock doesn't lock, and that's a pretty weak little wrist guard there. I don't know. It looks fine, but the concept just doesn't really work for me. Maybe it explains it a little bit more in the mini comic. The mini comic here, I believe it's the same one that Snakeface came with. So you see both of those guys are featured on the cover. And we've already seen Snakeface featured in the comic book. But Skeletor there in his Dragon Blast armor, he's featured as well. Now, I think I forgot to show you the comic book with King Hiss. But yeah, of course, he had his own comic book, which featured him as well. So just thought I should mention that. But anyway, this guy is fine. There's a lot of other better Skeletors there. So unless you're kind of like me and trying to just complete your whole set and get every weird version there is, then yeah, go ahead and track this one down. But if you're just looking for your first Skeletor, and maybe this is the first one you saw, I would say maybe hold off and, you know, maybe check online a little bit more. Maybe go to eBay and buy one of the other Skeletors that are a little better, a little more classic looking. Anyway, yeah, for accessories, he's got the sword, and I think that was about it, because the dragon and the chain and the padlock all kind of count as accessories. I don't know if this figure really warrants being a deluxe figure. If the dragon was a separate character with articulated legs and all that stuff, then sure. But as it stands, I just don't. This figure doesn't really feel deluxe to me. I don't think he's worth the extra $10. Anyway, before we move on and close up shop here, why don't we just bring out some of my other Skeletors and we'll do a quick comparison. So here is my complete line of Masters of the Universe Origins Skeletors. So as you can see, like, this guy here is my favorite. Now this head actually didn't come with this figure. It came with this one. It had two alternate heads. So this is Keldor. This is Skeletor pre-transformation. I took the extra Skeletor head, put it on the battle armor body. So even without this head is definitely the best with those kind of crystal eyes and everything. But even without that head, the battle armor version I think is superior to Dragon Blast. This is the 2000X version of Skeletor. He's pretty cool. This is the most classic version. We've got this one here that came with Screech the bird, and he's got an articulated jaw, which is pretty cool. Then we've got the snake armor, and then this is my least favorite, the terror claws, because he's got that glitter sports bra that I just can't get past. But yeah, there you go. That's all the Skeletors. He's somewhere in the middle of the pack, or near the bottom, I would say, out of all the Skeletors, but he's not bad. Okay, so that was my review of the latest Masters of the Universe Origins Deluxe figures, as well as a couple of their Mattel Creations exclusives. So, I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, please make sure to hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, leave me comments below, and be sure to come back for my next video, which I'm sure I'll post in about a week or so. So anyway, I'll see you then. Ciao.